Hey everybody, I wanted to make a quick little video about just some unwrapping and texturing and modeling tips for the class, because I've noticed a lot of people having the same kind of issue or making the same kind of mistake, I suppose, if you will. And that's typically when you're making big structures like a ground and other types of planes. A lot of you are most likely using Unity cubes and applying a texture to them, which isn't really a great idea for two reasons. One, the texture cubes are not unwrapped in a way that you want, so if you're using something like bricks and whatnot, it's not going to work very well for you because even in 3D Max, if you just use a regular cube, things don't actually like tile over properly from top to bottom or side to side, and the Unity cubes are even worse for that. And two, a lot of you are just leaving them as cubes, which isn't really nice looking. You have very hard edges. It just looks very CG and like not like low poly in a nice way. So what I recommend you doing is making all your big structure things, even if they are just kind of cubes, in 3D Max though, because you get a little bit of control. So the first thing I do is I kind of have this rock texture here. So I will convert it to an editable poly here. I'm going to apply a UVW unwrap modifier onto it. And open that up. And you'll see here what's basically happening is each of these squares is unwrapped right on top of each other. So I'm going to go to making sure my face is selected down here. Go to mapping, flat map, and just hit OK. That's going to separate out all my cubes and make sure they're all the right proportion. And I'm going to pick the cube, the front of the cube, that's my front of my object, and just going to position him here. And this is the top, so I'm going to rotate him this way. I'm going to pick a scale that I think is good for my rock. Depends on your game and the resolution of your texture and the scale of your other assets. That's the other thing. Make sure all your resolutions are fairly the same. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unwrap the sides and the top so they kind of match. It's never going to be perfect with just a cube, but you have to make a decision whether which edges are important, and usually that's the top and the side, and then the top over here going across here is usually covered up by some other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to edge select. I'm going to select this edge up here, but in my UV space. If I select it here, it's going to select both edges, so I don't want that. And I'm going to go to Tools, Stitch Selected, and you see it kind of warped both of my meshes here. I'm going to take this bias that pops up in this stitch tool. I'm going to set that to 0. Just right click on the arrows, it'll set it to 0. You could type in 0 as well. And you'll see here it'll maintain my proportions better. And I'm going to do that for the two side bits here. So stitch selected, they should stay at 0 now. Oops. And the other ones I can do as well, but they're not that important right now, especially for a side scroller, because I'm not going to see those bits. So there we go. And now, at the very least, we have a texture that now flows from side to side and over the top. It won't flow over this way, but that's okay. Again, it's not going to be perfect. So if you're doing something like bricks, at least your bricks will flow over the side and be actual bricks in that sort of way, which is very important to actually maintain like realistic kind of flow and proportions of textures. The other thing that I wanted to show you is not to just leave this as a cube. So what I'll actually do is I'll go through and actually, once I unwrap this cube and I'm kind of happy with the resolution and stuff, I can't really change this stuff after I start doing this, so be wary of that, is I'm actually going to model out some of these things and get rid of these sharp edges here, because your silhouette of your object is the most important bit here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go in here and just kind of start cutting along some of these details. Right, and it's never going to be, super perfect, depending on your texture. This isn't really a great texture for this example, but it's just the one I found so far, so, or just a quick one I kind of found for today, so I was like, yeah, whatever, this will be fine. Now your amount of modeling you're going to do is kind of up to you, and what you want to do with that. I'm using the cut tool right now, which can be very finicky. If you're in orthographic mode, so if you go to like front and then move your camera, it's going to look weird, but it's actually going to work a lot nicer too. So if you're having any weird issues with it not working well, that's one of those things that could kind of fix it. You see here, I'm just cutting along some of these details here. Now you're going to have to clean this up because it's going to be a pretty messy mesh after you do this, but you know, you're going to have to spend some time making sure the flow and all the polys are actually pretty nice. You know, even something like this is an okay start. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to select my vertices. I'm going to connect these. I'm just using the connect function here. I have it on a shortcut, so it works very quickly. Oh, don't want to do that. Just going to show you a quick example of this. Oh, looks like this one already got messed up. So what actually happened here is I selected these two and I connected them. It actually connected them behind this face here too because it's open. So you gotta have to be careful what order you kind of connect things in. It can cause some issues. That's like a whole other lesson. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you know, let me know. Okay, so let's say I did something just simple like this for now. Now, like I said, this is not going to be perfect and it might be a little ugly, but just bear with me here. This does take time, but it's worth it. It will make all your stuff look much better. Let's just get rid of this guy for now. Okay. So let's say even if I just move this down a little bit. Now, like I said, it's going to break a bunch of your other things here, but at least now I'm starting to get some detail on my mesh here, and I'm starting to break up that silhouette. Let's get rid of this here, you know, and I can start doing that in other places too. And this isn't ideal here. Let's undo that. And let's add a couple of just vertices in here. A couple right there. Just connecting these guys over here. All right, and then I could just start doing some of this type of situation here. Alright, and now if I just add a smoothing modifier to this, and just kind of do an auto smooth just to start, something a little lower because I'm having some weird issues here, you're starting to get, you know, a lot better detail in here. And when you look at this on an angle, it's now no longer a straight line. It's starting to feel a lot nicer. Sorry, my viewport did some crazy stuff. This is obviously still a straight line, so I would continue doing this type of stuff, right? Just, you know, start cutting into, you could even do big sections like this for now. Right. Right, start doing some stuff like that. It doesn't have to be, you know, again, perfect or super amazing, but you really don't want straight lines, especially on things like rocks and you know, organic type assets like that. Oh, look at this crazy thing I did. Right? Straight lines are just like a huge tell that this is like, you know, a not well thought out mesh. Somebody just slapped some stuff on here. And again, not the kind of stuff that you want on your portfolio. All right, so again, this is not a great example, but at least it's something, you know? There's still a lot of flat edges here. You know, and the problem is you don't want to look at this thing and notice that it's a cube, all right? When I'm starting to look at it in different direction, it's starting to look a little better. It's still very low poly and whatnot, but that's basically what you want to start doing with your textures, and start breaking up some of these kinds of meshes, and again, it'll light nicer, it'll look nicer. It'll have, you know, you're going to start getting rid of these straight lines too once you start doing more of this. It needs more geometry to start getting rid of some of this stuff, because it's still, you know, I still have a lot of geo left here that's not really doing much for me. All right, lots of these hard edges I want to start getting rid of, right? Model this guy in. You know, imagine if you modeled out some of these chunks, right? And again, I know this is a lot of work, but the cool thing is once you have this mesh done, especially if you take the time and do it from a whole bunch of different sides, this is going to be a very versatile mesh for you. You can use this in lots of different you know, ways, and like smush objects together, and really, you know, really like take advantage of this one really well modeled asset, as opposed to having a bunch of, you know, poorly unwrapped and textured cubes, which aren't really doing you many favors to making your game actually look, you know, good or interesting, right? You want people to forget that they're looking at a piece of CG art. You know, they don't want to see like hard edges and straight lines and all that kind of stuff, right? You want people, again, to forget that ever happened, right? I'm getting some stretching here, and I might, you know, some of it's going to be okay. It's never going to be perfect. Some of it I'm going to want to clean up eventually, and kind of decide, you know, where I want more geometry, where I need more detail, all that kind of jazz, right? So again, we're starting to get there, right? We're starting to get some detail. We're using our geometry to support our texture. We're not just relying on the texture itself, which is never good enough, you know? And if you actually had a normal map for this thing, it's just going to start looking, you know, better and better as you go on, right? So, you know, even if we eventually, you kind of want one big smoothing group, and it's starting to look nice. It's starting to look smooth, and starting to have some nice detail there. And again, we're supporting the details in the texture with geometry. So obviously this part still looks bad, but this corner is starting to look better. It's still maybe a little sharp there. You know, we got to figure out what kind of look we want for our assets here. All right, there we go. It's starting to look better. Yeah, so that's just like a quick little rundown. I mean, it would take me a little while to do this whole cube, especially at this detail, so I'm not going to do that for the tutorial because you guys would be here for a long time. But if you would like me to show you more of this type of stuff, I'm very happy to do it. So, ooh, that's a bad one. You can always remove some edges. Sometimes it's good to start big and simple. I probably started with too much detail. I probably should have just done this whole thing in like big strokes, and then started adding smaller details in there. But I kind of wanted to show you a little bit of an example of everything. So now imagine you had this in your game, and you had, you know, you had a couple of these, and then the cool thing is about the edges, like, then you can start kind of smashing edges together, and you can start getting some interesting shapes where, you know, this is a bad look, this straight line here, but this could be a fun look. This could be interesting, you know, and you can start doing stuff like that, especially if you had this on like a bit of an angle. you know, and then you can do something like that. And this blends a lot nicer than just having two cubes beside each other, right? Imagine if this was all modeled out on both sides, you'd get some interesting intersecting shapes, and you know, you won't get as much Z fighting or other issues like that when you have lots of kind of interesting detail like that. So anyways, that's kind of what I was saying in some of my critiques there. So if, you know, hopefully that's useful for you and kind of explains what I was saying. And if you need any other examples with any other types of textures, just let me know. Cool. Thanks, everybody.